the symbolism of eyes, surveillance, and omniscience. Pride's design is dominated by one recurring feature: eyes as control. The eyes represent awareness, surveillance, and judgment. Pride sees everything within his domain of shadow. This gives him a godlike presence, but it also reveals something deeper. He must see everything because he cannot tolerate uncertainty. The fear behind omniscience. True omniscience implies confidence. Pride's surveillance suggests anxiety. He watches everything because he fears losing control. He fears unpredictability. He fears the unknown, the inversion of vision. Despite seeing everything externally, pride lacks internal vision. He cannot see his contradictions, his vulnerabilities, his dependence. Thus, his many eyes symbolize a paradox: total external awareness, complete internal blindness. Darkness as identity, the abyss within. Pride's shadow form is not just an ability, it is his identity. Darkness as the unconscious. In psychological terms, darkness represents the unknown, the repressed, the unconscious. Pride does not merely contain darkness, he is subsumed by it, the loss of form. Unlike humans who have defined bodies, pride's form is fluid, undefined, expansive. This reflects a lack of stable identity. He is not a person, he is a force pretending to be a person. The abyss gazes back. There is a famous idea often attributed to Nietzsche: if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Pride is that abyss, but more importantly, he has gazed into himself and found nothing he is willing to accept. Why pride is secretly the most human homunculus. This is the ultimate irony. Despite rejecting humanity more than any other homunculus, pride is arguably the most human. The presence of attachment. His relationship with his mother reveals emotional capacity, desire for connection, familiarity with human roles. Even if he denies it, these traits exist, the experience of internal conflict. Unlike simpler homunculi, pride experiences cognitive dissonance, psychological tension, identity instability. These are deeply human experiences. The fear of weakness. Humans often overcompensate for insecurity, deny vulnerability, construct false identities. Pride embodies all of these. Humanity as repressed truth. Thus, pride's hatred of humanity is not based on superiority, it is based on recognition. He sees in humans the same fragility he possesses, the same contradictions he denies, the same potential for meaning he rejects, and this terrifies him. The moment of collapse, when identity fails. Pride's final moments are not just defeat, they are psychological exposure, stripped of illusion. Without his container, without his power, without his dominance, there is no hierarchy, there is no superiority, there is no mask, only the core remains. The child form revisited, his infant state symbolizes dependency, vulnerability, potential, but also incompleteness, lack of identity, absence of self-definition, the possibility of change. Unlike other homunculi, pride is not simply destroyed, he is reduced. This opens a philosophical question: can pride change? If identity is not fixed, then even pride could, theoretically, become something else. But this would require acceptance of humanity, integration of contradiction, abandonment of superiority. In other words, it would require him to become the very thing he despises. The human condition in its darkest form. Pride is not just a villain, he is a mirror, he reflects our desire to feel superior, our fear of vulnerability, our tendency to deny uncomfortable truths. His tragedy is not that he is evil, his tragedy is that he cannot accept himself. And in that rejection he becomes fragmented, dependent, ultimately powerless. Pride power without self. Pride exists as a powerful entity within a human shell, a being with overwhelming ability, a consciousness defined by superiority, yet he lacks genuine empathy, stable identity, moral independence, the inversion. This creates a striking inversion. Alphonse lacks a body but possesses a self. Pride possesses a body but lacks a self. The meaning of humanity. Through this contrast, the narrative suggests humanity is not defined by physical form, but by psychological integration. Alphonse is human because he accepts others, reflects on himself, chooses compassion. Pride is inhuman because he rejects others, denies himself, enforces dominance. Foucault and the philosophy of power. Pride's behavior can also be analyzed through the ideas of Michel Foucault, particularly his concepts of power and surveillance. Power as a system, not a possession. Foucault argues that power is not something one simply has. It is something that operates through systems, relationships, and structures. Pride embodies this idea. He is not just powerful, he is embedded in a system, father's plan, operating through networks, the homunculi, the state, maintaining control through surveillance, the panopticon. Foucault's concept of the panopticon describes a system where individuals are constantly visible, surveillance is internalized, control becomes self-sustaining, pride's shadow functions similarly. He watches everything within his domain. Others cannot escape his gaze. His presence enforces behavior, internalized control, but pride himself is also controlled. He operates within father's authority, the structure of the homunculi, the logic of hierarchy. Thus, he is both the watcher, the watched. This duality reveals power is not freedom, it is entanglement. The role of obedience, why pride never questions. One of pride's most defining traits is his absolute obedience, the absence of rebellion. Unlike greed, who rebels, pride never questions father. This is not loyalty, it is structural incapacity. Identity through submission. Pride's identity is entirely derived from his role as the first homunculus, his function within father's plan, his position in the hierarchy. To question father would be to question himself. The fear of autonomy. Autonomy requires self-definition, responsibility, uncertainty. Pride avoids all three. Thus, his obedience is not strength, it is avoidance of existential responsibility. Why pride's defeat is thematically necessary. Pride's defeat is not just a narrative outcome, it is a philosophical necessity. The incompatibility with human values. The world of Full Metal Alchemist ultimately affirms connection, sacrifice, imperfection. Pride represents the negation of all three. Thus, his continued existence would undermine the narrative's core message, the collapse of false hierarchies. Pride's defeat symbolizes the failure of imposed superiority, the rejection of dehumanization, the dismantling of authoritarian structures, reduction, not destruction. Importantly, pride is not annihilated, he is reduced. This suggests the possibility of change, the persistence of potential, the rejection of absolute condemnation, the architecture of a fragmented God. Across this analysis, pride emerges as a deeply layered construct, a narcissist built on insecurity, a shadow that refuses integration, a child who denies dependency, a servant who claims superiority, a watcher who cannot see himself. He is not whole, he is assembled, and because he is assembled, he can come apart. Pride, the tyranny of perfection, pride and moral philosophy, beyond good and evil. To fully grasp pride, we must move beyond simple moral binaries. He is not merely evil in the conventional sense. Instead, he represents a structural rejection of morality itself, the absence of moral framework. Most antagonists operate within some moral logic, however distorted. Revenge, justice, survival, desire. Pride operates outside of these. He does not justify his actions. He does not rationalize harm. He simply asserts hierarchy. This places him in a unique philosophical category, a being for whom morality is irrelevant because superiority replaces it. Instrumentalization of life. For pride, all beings, human or otherwise, are tools, resources, obstacles. They are never ends in themselves, moral subjects, entities with intrinsic value. This aligns with the inverse of the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, who argued that individuals must be treated as ends, not means. Pride represents the complete rejection of this principle, the ethics of hierarchy. Pride's worldview can be summarized as value is determined solely by position within a hierarchy. This has several implications. Those above have absolute authority. Those below have no inherent worth. Morality becomes subordinate to power. This is not just fictional, it mirrors real-world systems where hierarchy replaces ethics. Pride and real-world power structures. Pride's psychology is not confined to fiction. It reflects patterns observed in authoritarian regimes, corporate hierarchies, social dominance systems, dehumanization as control. Historically, systems of power often rely on reducing individuals to categories, denying individuality, framing others as inferior. Pride's humans are insects ideology follows this exact pattern. Dehumanization allows violence without guilt, control without resistance, exploitation without consequence, the illusion of legitimacy. As Selim Bradley, pride embodies legitimacy. He is the Führer's son, a symbol of innocence, socially protected. This mirrors how power often hides behind institutions, tradition, appearances of normalcy. The most effective authority is not the one that appears oppressive, but the one that appears natural. Internalized hierarchy. One of the most insidious aspects of power is internalization. People begin to accept their place, justify inequality, enforce the system themselves. Pride's existence reinforces this. He does not need to constantly assert dominance. His presence alone structures behavior, consumption and identity, the final fragmentation. Pride's act of consuming others is not just physical, it is deeply symbolic. Consumption as identity formation. When pride consumes, gluttony to he gains hunger, Solf J. Kimbley to he gains resistance. This reflects a psychological truth. Identity is shaped by what we internalize, but pride internalizes without integration, the failure to assimilate. Healthy identity formation requires processing external influences, integrating them into the self, maintaining coherence. Pride does none of these. He absorbs but does not reconcile. This leads to internal conflict, loss of control, fragmentation, the collapse of purity. Pride sees himself as pure, but every act of consumption contaminates him. This creates a contradiction. To become stronger, he must become less pure. To maintain purity, he must remain limited. This is an unsolvable dilemma. Pride as a universal human warning. Pride's character transcends narrative. He represents a universal psychological danger, the danger of absolute identity. When identity becomes rigid, contradictions are denied, growth becomes impossible, fragility increases. Pride's downfall is the result of identity rigidity, the fear of vulnerability. Humans often hide weakness, overcompensate with confidence, avoid self-reflection. Pride embodies this at an extreme level. His entire existence is a defense against vulnerability, the rejection of humanity. To reject humanity is to reject imperfection, emotion, connection, but these are the very things that create meaning. Thus, pride's rejection leads not to superiority, but to emptiness. Pride's true nature, the inversion of power. Everything pride claimed is reversed. Strength is weakness, superiority is dependency, control is helplessness. The child recontextualized. His final form as a child is no longer a disguise. It is honest, unfiltered, real. For the first time, pride is not performing. He simply is. The possibility of redemption. Unlike other homunculi, pride is not erased. He is given the potential to grow, change, become something else. This introduces a final philosophical question. If identity is not fixed, is anyone beyond transformation? The tyranny of perfection. Pride's story is not about power. It is about the failure of perfection. Across this entire analysis, we see a consistent pattern. He seeks superiority but reveals insecurity. He seeks control but exposes dependency. He seeks purity but becomes fragmented, the core truth. Pride fails because he rejects the fundamental condition of existence. To exist is to be imperfect, the human contrast. Characters like Edward Elric and Alphonse Elric succeed not because they are flawless, but because they accept limitation, embrace connection, integrate contradiction, pride as reflection. Ultimately, pride is not distant from humanity. He is an exaggeration of its darkest tendencies, the desire to dominate, the fear of weakness, the refusal to change. The final lesson. Pride teaches a paradox. The pursuit of perfection leads to fragmentation. The acceptance of imperfection leads to wholeness. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.